The Clockmaker's Secret. Part 1. The Quiet Life of Thomas. In the small, mist-covered town of Willowbrook, time seemed to move slower than everywhere else in the world. The town was famous for its narrow cobblestone streets, bright red brick cottages, and an old stone tower in the center of the square. But more than anything, Willowbrook was known for its clocks, and the man who kept those clocks running was Thomas Sterling. Thomas was a middle-aged clockmaker. He had thick brown hair turning gray at the temples, gentle blue eyes, and hands that were always stained with black grease and copper polish. For 30 years, Thomas had lived above his small shop on the corner of High Street. His daily routine was as precise and predictable as the gears in a fine Swiss watch. Every morning at exactly 6 a.m., Thomas woke up to the soft chime of a brass mantel clock. He brewed a pot of black tea, toasted 2 slices of brown bread, and ate breakfast by his bedroom window, watching the morning fog lift from the quiet streets. At 7 a.m., he unlocked the heavy wooden front door of Sterling Clockworks. His shop was a magical, noisy place. Every wall was covered with clocks of all shapes and sizes, huge pendulum grandfather clocks that ticked with a slow, heavy thump-thump, colorful cuckoo clocks from Germany that chirped every hour, and tiny pocket watches laying open on velvet trays, looking like small silver treasures. The air always smelled of machine oil, dried lavender, and old paper. Thomas was not a man of many words. He was quiet, soft-spoken, and kept mostly to himself. The townspeople respected him because he was an honest craftsman, but nobody really knew him well. They saw him as part of the scenery, just like the old stone tower in the square. "Good morning, Thomas," Mrs. Gable would say as she walked past the shop with her morning basket of fresh fruit. "Good morning, Mrs. Gable," Thomas would reply with a short nod, barely looking up from his magnifying lens and tiny metal tweezers. Thomas believed his life was complete. He had his work, his quiet routine, and his collection of ticking companions. He did not need adventure, and he certainly did not like surprises. However, life has a habit of changing when you least expect it. Part 2. The Mysterious Package. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon in late autumn. Rain hit the shop windows like tiny glass beads, and the wind blew wet fallen leaves against the front step. At 4 p.m., the brass bell above the shop door rang sharply. Thomas looked up from a delicate silver pocket watch he was repairing. Standing in the doorway was a young girl, no older than 12 years old. She wore a bright yellow raincoat that dripped water onto the wooden floor. She had wild brown curls sticking out from under her hood and eyes full of energy and curiosity. In her arms, she held a large wooden box wrapped in a thick, worn leather strap. "Are you Mr. Thomas Sterling?" the girl asked, her voice clear and energetic. "I am," Thomas replied, setting his tools down carefully on a soft cloth. "How can I help you today, young lady?" "My name is Maya," she said, taking a step into the shop and looking around in absolute wonder. "My grandfather told me you are the only person in the county who can fix this. He said if anyone could make it work again, it was you." Thomas smiled gently. He was used to grandmothers bringing in old alarm clocks or farmers bringing in rusty pocket watches. "Well, let's have a look. Bring it over to the counter." Maya walked across the shop, lifted the heavy wooden box, and set it down on the counter with a heavy thud. Thomas unbuckled the leather strap and carefully lifted the dark oak lid. Inside lay a strange, complex machine, unlike anything he had ever seen in his 30 years of clockmaking. It was a clock, but it had no numbers on its face. Instead of standard hands, it had 3 copper needles of different lengths.
Around the edges of the dial were small carved symbols that looked like stars, ocean waves, and trees. The interior mechanism was visible through a thick glass plate. Hundreds of microscopic silver gears, brass wheels, and tiny crystal tubes filled with a faint blue liquid. Thomas stared at the machine in complete silence. His heart beat a little faster. As a master craftsman, he knew immediately that this was not a factory-made clock. It was a masterpiece of custom engineering. But it was entirely silent. The main spring was broken, 3 central gears were jammed, and the blue liquid in the crystal tubes was completely still. "Where did your grandfather get this?" Thomas asked, his voice full of curiosity. "He found it in an old chest in the attic," Maya explained excitedly. "He said it belonged to my great-great-grandmother. It hasn't worked for over 50 years. Can you fix it?" Thomas examined the delicate mechanism closely. Fixing a normal clock was easy for him. He could do it with his eyes closed. But this clock was a puzzle, a masterpiece with no blueprint. Fixing it would take days, maybe weeks of slow, precise work. It would disrupt his strict daily routine. He looked at Maya's hopeful face. Her eyes were shining with excitement. "I cannot promise anything," Thomas said slowly, holding up a finger. "It is very damaged and the design is extremely unusual. But I will try." Maya beamed with joy. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling. I'll come back every afternoon after school to check on your progress." Before Thomas could say that he preferred to work alone, Maya turned around, flashed a quick wave, and darted out the door into the rain, leaving Thomas alone with the mysterious clock. Focused, atmospheric. Part 3. The Long Hours. That evening, for the first time in 10 years, Thomas did not close his shop at 6 p.m. He stayed at his workbench late into the night. The rest of the town was asleep, but in Sterling Clockworks, a single lamp burned brightly. Thomas wore his magnifying goggles, carefully taking apart the mysterious clock piece by piece. He placed each tiny screw, gear, and spring onto a numbered velvet board so he wouldn't lose them. The craftsmanship was breathtaking. Every gear was hand-carved with extraordinary detail. As he examined the main brass plate beneath the gears, he noticed a tiny inscription written in Latin. Tempus non solum numerator sed vivitur. Thomas translated it softly to himself. Time is not only counted, it is lived. He sat back in his chair and stared at the words. He repeated them silently. Time is not only counted, it is lived. For years, Thomas had spent his entire life measuring time. He watched seconds tick away, recorded minutes, and repaired the tools that tracked hours. But had he actually been living his life? He lived alone. He rarely talked to his neighbors beyond polite greetings. He had no hobbies outside this room, no real travel experience, and no deep connections. He was like a well-oiled clock, functional, precise, but cold. The next afternoon at 3:30 p.m., the shop bell rang sharply. Maya burst in, carrying her school bag. "Hi, Mr. Sterling. How's it going?" she asked eagerly, leaning over the counter. Thomas was surprised by her sudden arrival, but he pointed to the velvet board. "I have completely disassembled the mechanism. The problem is greater than I thought. 3 of these microscopic copper gears are damaged beyond repair. I will have to forge new ones by hand." Instead of looking disappointed, Maya's eyes lit up. "You can make gears by hand? Can I watch?" Thomas hesitated. "Well, I suppose so, but you must be quiet and not touch anything." Maya pulled up a tall wooden stool and sat quietly. For the next hour, she watched in fascinated silence as Thomas melted tiny bits of copper, shaped them using a small lathe, and filed the tiny teeth of the gears with surgical precision. As Thomas worked, Maya began to ask questions. Why did you become a clockmaker? Do you have a favorite clock in the shop? Have you ever traveled to Switzerland? At first, Thomas gave short one-word answers. He was not used to talking while working. But Maya's genuine curiosity was contagious. Soon, Thomas found himself explaining how pendulums react to temperature changes, why silver oxidizes, and how different metals expand and contract. He told her stories about the historical clocks he had read about in books. When 5 p.m. arrived, Maya stood up to leave. "This is so cool, Mr. Sterling. See you tomorrow." After she left, the shop felt strange.